Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Now On podcast. Today I'm going to talk about being bullied like I was for most of my life, even up till today. I'm going to talk about my experiences growing up with the bully and how he affected my life and some lessons I've kind of learned to deal with it. Definitely not the easiest thing to talk about, but this podcast really isn't meant to talk about the easy stuff. But before we get into it, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to this podcast and to please leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. That kind of helps us get more exposure on Apple for one and some of the other channels. Also go to nowonpodcast.com if you'd like to see how you can support the production of the podcast. Just go to nowonpodcast.com and click support. Now let's get to dealing with my bully, the worst person I've ever known. So I don't remember when I met him, but he definitely called me fat. He'd say I was fatter than the other kids. He'd say I was more stupid than the other kids, less of a boy than the other boys, never the boy that the girls thought was cute. Funny, but maybe not the funniest. Definitely the nicest, but that also makes you kind of less of a boy, less of a man, and less attractive, and that's all you have. So for years, he would bully me, and I felt weak. I was happy, but empty. I had optimism, but saw every success as a stroke of luck rather than something I'd earned. I thought it might get worse when I got to high school, and I was not looking forward to that. So I was able to exercise. I was able to beat him back for a few years. In order to fight, I became stronger. I exercised, I lost weight, I gained muscle, and I became the strongest in the gym in my high school, and the bully backed off completely. I kind of just flipped everything. He said I was fat, and so I wasn't anymore. He told me that I wasn't attractive to girls, so I got girlfriends, the prettiest girlfriends, the hardest girlfriends to get. And he said he told me being nice was weak, so I just wasn't nice anymore. Now I kind of portray myself as charming and nice, but really I was kind of just more manipulative and possessive. I was doing it from an appearance of being selfless and the nice guy, but really it was all for my own personal gains. And I thought that conquering my bully was to overcome his every criticism, when in reality, he completely changed everything about me until I was living every day for him, essentially. When I would succeed, I would rub it in his face. Even when I was winning and on top, my success was more like a defense against failure rather than any kind of validation that I was worth what I was receiving or what I'd earned. So that didn't really sustain for too long. So I started slowly kind of digressing. I gained weight again. I became a husband and a father, which gave me all this joy and meaning, but I'd really struggle to feel worthy of unconditional love from anybody. So then when things got hard, when I lost my job, when we incurred a lot of debt, we'd been living in an apartment for nearly 10 years, losing my job, then all of a sudden dreams were kind of dashed, and it was square on my shoulders. It was entirely my fault. We had a 2-year-old son, and we had just found out that another baby was on the way. So then we found out my wife would lose her job in a few months too. Frankly, when I lost my job, he was actually on the call. He told me, "This is who you are, not who you thought you were. This is who you are." And I frantically started applying for jobs, any job that had the director, VP, senior in their titles, anything impressive. And with each unacknowledged application, his narrative became what I would tell myself too. I remember breaking down one night to my wife and saying, "I feel like no one believes in me. I feel like everything's been lost. I completely lost faith in myself." And my bully was all too eager to affirm this. He'd blind me to anything other than self-loathing and this fog that I was living in. When I took my last job, when I took this last job, I had a checklist of minimum requirements that needed to be met in order to accept it. A title, a purpose, a salary, the desired flexibility for family, all these things. And frankly, all the boxes were checked. Now, after losing that job in desperation and just kind of weighted down by persistent, unyielding bullying and the pressure of a growing family, I accepted an offer that checked 0 boxes. 0. And that night, I cried myself to sleep. That bully knows because he was there too. I couldn't get rid of him then, and I can barely ever even push him out now because he's in my head. My bully never existed outside of it. My bully is me. He's here with me now. He's telling me, he's standing right behind me, telling me I'm stammering too much, and he's telling me I'm wasting my time because nobody's listening, and that everyone else's podcast is so much better than this one. So he tells me every day that I'm not enough, but the part about it is he doesn't shout it. He kind of just whispers it. It's not my major failures that he jumps up and down and celebrates in front of me. After all, those are just manifestations of what he's been saying the whole time. Inevitably, it's just inevitable that this was going to happen, right? No. He whispers his ridicule when I misspell a word to an email in a client, to a client in an email. He manipulates my Facebook algorithm to spotlight everyone else's achievements and skews my eyes so I don't even see my own. He's so powerful that he can make minor setbacks feel major and small wins feel just insignificant to the point that everything's just flat and joyless. So since he's in my head, we're both married to my wife, and he does all he can to distance us. Since he's me, he's also the father to my children, and he resents them for their limitations they put on our lives. He's just a monster. But I've learned to deal with him in some ways that keep him from fully controlling me. So I intended for this episode to be a focus on a now on moment, a pivotal moment in my life that kind of reset the course of it. But as I kind of do this podcast more and more, and as I explore these moments themselves, I realize that what makes these moments significant is really the lifetime leading up to them, and whether or not you've built up the courage to combat the bully or if he gets to win the day. So I'm going to talk more about this exact moment, what it was, and what I did, and how I grew into it, and how I grew from it. But first, I need to take a quick break for a plug from one of our sponsors.